webinar on the e-commerce view engine and web API that was released with the Dynamicweb 9.5 back in August. I'll give you an introduction to why we did it and how you can get started with looking into this. So the agenda for the day, why, what, and how, and so on. Just the explanation of why we're doing the things that we're doing, and then I'm going to present the new features that is part of this topic. That's a new product catalog app to replace the product catalog that has been around for 2 years. Then there's a new web API interface where you can query data without using pages in Dynamicweb and use it directly against the new view engine. And then we're going to take a look at the view engine and the view models from Ecommerce, which is also part of all of this, and a little bit on feeds in general. And we have some demos, some code demo later on. So first, some of the challenges in the old way that the Dynamicweb catalog and how we render products, some of the problems that we have with that. First of all, the renderer, which is the one that takes the product data and put it into the Razor templates or the HTML templates, it contains a lot of view logic, and all of that logic is something that we want to take out of that part as well. Then we also have the issue that all of this is template based, so you need to use the old get value and get string syntax in your Razor templates, which is basically the old approach. And we wanted to give you the view models like we have in page views and paragraphs and so on. And in order to do all of this, we needed to refactor the old rendering quite a bit. So, and there are other issues coming, as you can see in this list. So that's why we chose to build this new one. Also, the old model, because of the template system, it's what we call optimistic. It basically takes out a lot of data from the database and also renders it, no matter if you need it or not. So it's very difficult to optimize performance, and it's very difficult to ensure that we don't run unnecessary code and query unnecessary data from the database. That's another issue we want to solve with this new view engine. And also it's old. It's been around for 13 years now, or 14 years, the old product catalog and the rendering. And it's getting complicated because there's added a lot of new features, and we have a lot of you using this. So it's very difficult to for us to optimize it and change it in any way, because there are always solutions that is using some of these new features. Yeah, and also, of course, of that, there's way too much logic in the rendering layer and makes it relatively slow compared to what we could achieve. And then we have the final thing that also is counting for repeater is that if we need JSON data for these asynchronous website with product lists, then we need to put it inside a layout template and put it inside a product list template that returns or writes JSON, because that's the only way we can get hold of things like prices and discounts and all of these things, because of all the logic that takes place in the old renderer. So a lot of challenges. And then we also have some trends. We want to reuse the data in many places, not just inside Dynamicweb page with products as an e-commerce. We want to reuse the data, for example, in apps or other external services. The PIM also needs it for channels and so on. And microservices, getting data from the small services around the world and combine it into an application, is also a trend. We have this concept of headless e-commerce and CMS, which we're seeing a lot. And of course, we also want to address that without putting everything into a hand-coded JSON template. And we have .NET Core coming, and at some point, we need to convert Dynamicweb into also being .NET Core compliant. And in order to do that, we need to be independent on some of the things that is not present in .NET Core, and that would be HTTP context for one. And we have other needs in our own system, like we need all this product data in PIM and in channels, and a repeater is using the JSON. We need to put all this data into Amazon and so on. So all of these things also have an effect on why we did all of this. And you have seen these e-commerce services, a couple of releases now, and basically what we do with e-commerce services, we are refactoring some of the internals of e-commerce, and that is how we get things out of the database and put it into the objects like a product or a group and all the other things that we have. And part of what we're doing here is optimizing and re-implementing caching, and we make use of a lot of new features in .NET and also modern coding patterns. And all of this is, of course, to solve a couple of things, and one of them is performance, because we can optimize quite a bit, and we can also move some of the logic that we have in the rendering and move it up the stack and into this service layer. Another very important part of the e-commerce services is they are also moving into a state of not being HTTP context compliant or e-commerce context compliant. So, for example, which currency is currently being used for rendering products, that is taken out of the API itself. So it's a parameter that we need to pass around. I'll show you in a minute how that works. So the OTA architecture basically looks like this. We have a product and we have a renderer and we have a template, and a lot of the things that happens is done by the renderer. So the renderer takes the product, find the prices for those products, and find the field values for those products, and so on. And all of that is combined in the renderer and passed into the template, and that is relatively slow and complicated, and it makes it very difficult to reuse any of the data without using the renderer. So we don't get all the logic of pricing and like a customer specific price if we don't use the renderer, because it's basically the one taking care of that. So, and then we have this problem with HTTP context current, which is sitting in here and is doing a lot of the logic. And also we have references for HTTP context in product and price manager and so forth. So with the new architecture, basically what we do is that we've created this new view engine, and the view engine is basically something that takes care of many of the same things as the renderer, but instead of returning a rendered result like in HTML, it returns a number of view models, and these view models can be reused across the different stacks in Dynamicweb. So one place to use these is inside the product catalog app, as you see on the upper left. And that's basically the replacement of the renderer that we see in this one. So that product catalog app will take these view models, put it into a Razor template that supports view models, and just render the view models in HTML. No logic in the product catalog at all, just some settings and configuration of the view models and the view engine. The same goes for the web API that can return XML and JSON. Based on these view models, so you just query some of the functions that we have, or methods that we have on the view engine, and they will return the view models and serialize them into the proper format. And we have other features like the feeds in PIM, and basically you can create your own consumers using the view engine by configuring it and returning view models that can be used in all kinds of scenarios. You can, for example, use it in MVC, sitting next to Dynamicweb if you need to, or any other consumption that you can think of. So, and under the view engine, we have all these new services, the product service and price service and so on, and all of this is HTTP context insensitive. Almost. We are not totally done yet, but we're getting there. And under all of it, there are repositories, and these repositories are the ones taking care of communicating with the database, basically. Another thing that is a benefit out of all of this, it's much easier to make unit tests on top of all of this, because we're not context dependent. And now we have the HTTP context current only available, or you only use it up in the product catalog app, and basically taking it out of the logic that takes the data out of the system. So I hope this makes a little bit of sense, and you understand what it is. It is kind of technical, but now I'm going to show you how we use this, and we're going to take a look at some code as well. So first I'm going to show you the product catalog, the new app, and the templates that comes with that. Then I'm going to show you the web API and some JSON feeds, and in the end I'll show you a bit of code, how you can make your own uses of the view engine and the view models and return them in your own code. So let's first take a look at the product catalog app. So I have my Rapido version of Dynamicweb right here, and you can see I have the old or regular paragraph right here called products with the product catalog app, and this is the one that takes, of course, data through the old rendering, and I have all the settings here, and I put it into the old, let me see, the old template model. So I have all of these. Oh no, I don't do it on this one because it's Rapido, but I get the good old-fashioned rendering engine and the good old templates that we have available in here, and we use things like get tag and get value and all of that as we know from templates. So that's the old one. What we do now is I've created a new paragraph right here. I've added an app to that one, and this is now the product catalog for view model. That's the name so far of this new app. And it looks very similar to the old one because, of course, they do the same thing. So some of the configuration options you have here are the same. So the first difference you will see here, this one is at least currently based entirely on running on the index. So you're not able to configure this to run on database like the old one. And this is, of course, a performance consideration, and also how we see the e-commerce will be going forward using the e-commerce API. So I've chosen a product query right here, and I have the facet fields no difference here compared to how it works in the old app, and I can also override some default parameters and sorting and so on. Then I have a bit of display information. How many pages do we have on each page? I also have templates. I'll get back to that in just a minute. And then we have something different down here, and this is where we configure basically how should the view model behave. I can say I want to render only price, and then we'll not render or do creating data for all the other properties that we have available for prices. On the product, we have a lot of different values that we can render out. Some of them are relatively expensive to do. So right now, default is we render all of it. But now, if I really want to optimize, I can say I only want name, number, and price, and nothing else. That means we don't do any variant combination or related products or load any product category field values and so on. And this makes it much faster. So now it's possible to define exactly what we want to render into the template, and in that way optimize the performance. And we go about the product list, and the rated products and variant combinations and so on. So that's basically how it works right now. Then we have the templates, and the templates are different because you cannot reuse anything that we have available in the old model. Let me see. No, I didn't get it over here. So taking a look at the product list view template, I'll just try to open it in Visual Studio. So I have a list template right here. Now I don't have any references for Dynamicweb in here, so we'll get some things. As you can see, it looks a bit different up here. First of all, I'm using the product catalog namespace, which is where we have the view model and the view engine in here. And then we see I have a view model template of product list view model, which is a new thing, and that's basically what we get out of the view engine. So the view engine is the one that gathers all the data that we need using some configuration, and in return we get a number of view models, and usually it's the product list view model, which is, as the name states, a list of products. And then if we take a look at how we do it, this is the interesting part. If the model has products, it's different from null. We'll just iterate through these for each product in model.products. And this is so then a product view model instead of a product list view model. And then I have these properties that I can write, product.number, ID, and so on. And if the price is different from null, then I render the price. And I also have variants and variant combinations that I can render. And right now, in this state, these, like the product price will be rendered because I have it included in, I have all the properties included in the product list. So, and if I take some of them out, we will have product.price being null, for example, because I have chosen not to render it. So that's basically how that works. So if we take a look at the product list based on this, don't mind the layout of all of this. This is the rendering of the paging. I have set up the size of this one to be 10 pages, and I have 300 and some products. So that's why I get 30 pages. And then I get the rendering of the product, which is basically what we see here. So I have product number, ID, variant ID, language ID, short description, and I have a price as well, which is what we see here. And you can see there's one difference here is if I use the price tag directly, it's a double and I get the raw value out of the system. But the price here is also a price view model. So you can see product.price, price view model, and I have one of the properties right here. So let's take a look at how we can find and change some of that in the API documentation. So I'll do a search for price view model here. And I have all the properties, and I have the price, which is the one I'm using right now. I can change it to price formatted like this, and then I get it out formatted in the currency. So now this template is not the one I'm running on in my example, so I just need to change files, product lists, this one. And I'll just change the property on the price list and do an update here. And now instead of getting the prices as doubles, I'll get them formatted in the default currency on this website. So, and if we take a look at these price view models, we can then see some of the features that we have available, and it's much easier to understand what you can actually get out of this instead of using the get tag and the template tags method that we know. So that's the general introduction to the product catalog app. So the takeaways from this is it's much easier to optimize for performance and so on, and the templates are now using the view model, and the way we get the data out is through this new view engine, which is optimized quite a bit. So I hope this makes sense. So the next one, I'm going to show you the web API and how that works, and it basically it's using the same. So we can see now I just showed the product catalog, which is the upper left corner. Now I'm going to show the web API, and these two things go through the exact same stack and do the same things. The only difference is that instead of having an app that we configure using checkboxes, the web API is configured using query string parameters. So let's take a look at some features related to that. So this is just calling an API. We have something called DV API. We have the products sub namespace, and I have get product group list of group 5, which will basically just give us all the products. And if I just do like this, I'll get an exception saying language ID cannot be null. And that's because this group exists basically in more than one language. And since all of this stack now, the view engine and the view models and so on, does not have any context at all, we don't know what language you want. So you need to specify these things. So we say, I wanted language ID language 1, and I want currency code euro. So if we start by doing that, I'll still get one saying, and that's because we don't have any properties, and that's the last one we do. What properties do we want out of a property on the product list? I'll just go with the ID. So now I get a very simple JSON feed out here, and I can expand it with additional features like just the name, say name, and I'll get ID and name. And in this way, I can configure everything that's coming out of this one using just secure string parameters. So let's show also the price. And I'll do like this. Now I get a price view model added, and I get all the price attributes as well in this one. And now I can change context of all of this, change to a currency code called Danish, and I'll get the Danish prices instead of the European prices in O1. And I can of course also change language to something. Let's say language 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which does not exist. And I'll get an information about this does not exist. Also, that happens if I write a property that does not exist, Nicolai, and I get a property saying Nicolai is not valid, and I get a list of all the valid properties that we can configure on this one. So I can just take some of these, just to take an example. I'll just replace that. Oh, and we get some additional spaces. We don't want that. So in this way, it's relatively easy to use the API, and it will help you what is valid and what's not valid. And this is basically how the web API works. And you can always do exactly the same with the web API as you can do with the product catalog app, as I showed you right here, because it's basically one and the same thing. So we have a question from Mario. Is it possible to retrieve just the price formatted instead of the entire price info? That's a good question. So when I add, let's go back to number name dot price, and I don't know if I can say dot price formatted like this, maybe. Nope, I'm not able to do that. There might be something else I can add to this one and to configure exactly which ones to return from this one. I have to be I'll get back to you on that one. So, but I guess it's possible because if you take a look at the app down here, I can say on the price I want only price formatted like this one. So it's just a matter of what is the syntax for using the URLs, which I don't know. So that was that. A few notes on this. The web API comes in versions. You can just discard it and you'll get the latest version at all times. But if you're doing stuff that requires the specific version, or you don't want to run into the problem that we update what is returned or how it behaves, some of these web API as we update the versions, you can specify an explicit version of this web API. And we have a number of methods that you can call on the product controller in the current version. So you have something called verify connection, and then you could get product list and group list and get a single product. And then those are the ones that is currently supported. And you can just take a look at in the web API in the documentation, because the view model factory is basically defining what is possible and how it works and what are the properties and so on. So, and there's no security on the web API as it is right now, so you can just query it directly, and as you can with page requests today on a product list, you can just list products as today. So we might get some authentication on this if it's needed some way or another. Okay. Take a look at some of the codes and how you can cope with all of this in your own versions of things that works with product data. So first, let's take a look at the view model diagram. It looks a bit complicated. So in the middle sits the product view model, which is basically the one that sits and holds all of the product information. So on top of the product view model, I also have the product list view model. So that's if I have a list of products, of course, I would get a number of these product view models. But it's the product view model that has a lot of the logic. So, and you can see it has a view model specific for related products or category field values or prices or stock or media, that's images and documents and so on, and fields and field values. If you have custom fields on the product, you'll get that in that view model, manufacturer and so on. And then we have a thing like variants. If you look at that in the middle, a variance on a product view model is basically just a new list of product view models. So this is how it works. So the view model itself is not a simple one. It consists of its own properties, and then it has also properties that are instances of other view models. So a rather complicated view model structure, but it also makes it easy to duck through the system itself. And as you can see, some of these view models exist more than once on the product, like the price, that's the price view model. A discount is very similar, it's the same thing, it's also a price view model. So and price before discount. So you basically have three properties on the product called price, discount, and price before discount. That is, all of them is a price view model, and so on. So to code with all of this, this is a bit of code that will query data on the view engine and return a number, return a view model. And before we do that, we add some configuration on all of this. So if we take a look, first we have this product list settings, which is a product list view model settings object. And we use this one to feed into the view engine, and the view engine will then decide based on these settings what to return, and that means which properties and page sizes and stuff like that. Then we have the IDs that we want to get out, the product IDs, which products do we need to query. And you can see this is a list of the order IDs coming out, and that's basically a setting or something that we add to the view model factory that creates these view models. So inside the view engine, we don't have any logic that queries what kind of which products to show. We always do that outside of the view engine as it is right now. So that's the logic of the product catalog or something else that takes care of these information. So it needs a list of these product auto IDs, and that's basically what we do. So we create or call the view model factory, which is the view engine itself, and that will give us a view model with all the product IDs that we give it, and it will also give us or take into consideration the settings, what page size, what page are we on, and all that logic will be taken care of the view model factory. And we get a list view model back of products. And in this example, we'll just render it, and that means we just create a new template instance, call the set view model with the model will return from the view engine, and we'll just return the output in HTML. So these 4 lines of code in the green field right now is basically the replacement of the old rendering engine, which is 5,000 or 6,000 lines of code as it is now. And you can basically do this yourself. When you have the model, you can do whatever you want to do. And also important to understand is that the product list settings and all of this is context independent. So you can do it in something that doesn't have any context at all and no HTTP context. So you can do it in your own controllers, or you can do it in your own web API that doesn't have a context either, or you can do it inside a thread or scheduled task or all kinds of weird places where you usually would have problems with context. With this, you can use the code wherever you want. So the state of this view engine, you can use the product catalog app already, and you can also use the web APIs already. They're released on the 9.5. 9.6 that is due in 2 weeks will also contain some improvements and things on this one. And there are some things that you cannot do. It's not possible to search directly in the web API. But you can use, of course, search using the product catalog app. And that's because it's a feature not of the view engine itself, but a feature on the controller on top of it. And then we also have some data missing, probably because there's a lot of data coming out of the old rendering. So these view models will need to be getting some new information or some new properties as we go along, and this is based on the input that we get from you. So 9.6 will already contain some more information or some more properties compared to what you have released today. And during the spring, we will also implement Rapido on top of the product catalog and the web APIs, and ensure that all the things that we do in Rapido can also be done using these two new ways of rendering data. So, but give it a spin and just shoot me an email when you run into issues or need more data into this. It's relatively easy for us to add new stuff on this one. So, and I guess that's it for this webinar. So just fire away if you have any questions, as it is right now.